Just wait. Welcome everybody. Apologies for the late start to this briefing. We had a few technical issues and also ran a little bit over time with talking about our representation reviews. Obviously there are a few extra things to discuss around that at the moment. So we're looking forward to this presentation on the Newhanga Community Centre and where we're at with that. So I'll pass over to Dave and Michelle.
All right, thank you very much. Got some slides, please. Right, so we're going to break this session down into sort of three parts today. Firstly, we're just going to report back on the recommendations from the latest building condition assessment. Then we're just going to talk and really round out the needs assessment that we undertook. We held a workshop with councillors, engaged with the community, so we're going to just come back and report back on the findings of that. And then we're just going to update on what's happening in the meanwhile space and then talk about next steps. So I won't linger on this slide, but obviously everybody knows that there was a community centre built by the community for the community, and we've had weather tightness issues, and the centre closed in June in 2021 due to the presence of toxic spores. So we recently have undertaken a further more detailed building condition assessment on the building. That was in conjunction with reviewing the earlier reports that we had done. So I guess the assessment confirmed that the building is subject to significant weather tightness failure. There is, they found more toxigenic mould, and really the toxins are still, toxigenic mould is still present. And I think too, just the other outcome that was quite important is if we were just to remediate the building or try and fix the building up, given its complex building envelope, external building envelope, it would still be susceptible in the expert's opinion to risk of further weather tightness issues. So the recommendation that came through was to demolish the building and then to replace it with a new build of a more rectangular, squarish footprint, and that would obviously allow us to improve the internal layout and the connection to the outside, which were sort of a couple of themes that were picked up on. And the estimate to do that is around the $7 million mark for a single building. If we were wanting to take advantage of that and build a second story, it would be about 11.5. I think the other thing too, just to bear in mind, if we were to build a new building, the OPEX, we would experience OPEX savings over remediating the old building of up to 25%. So I'll now take questions. If anyone's got any questions on the building.
Any questions on the slide so far? Nigel?
Yeah, the rectangle that you're talking about, we had a briefing on the Waikanai Library, and I suggested something like the Guggenheim on Fifth Avenue, or somewhere between that and a box, right? And so one of the reasons we want the new Waikanai Library to be a building that people talk about. Oh, have you seen the new Waikanai Library? Yeah, and obviously what's inside is important too. I think it would be really good for people to say, I wouldn't want to hear people say, have you seen the new box down in Paraparaumu? It'd be great if they said, God, have you seen that new building down in Paraparaumu? And so I'd just note here is that if we're building something that has some kind of visionary statement about it, as rather than just as a functionary box.
I think when we talk about a rectangular we're talking about the envelope. We're not talking. You can still have a rectangular building that looks smashing. Yeah.
We're going Bauhaus.
I'll ask you a question.
Rob?
After the next one, I think.
Yeah, Rob. It's just on the slides so far.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Dave. Just a question. When was that building constructed?
1996.
1996. So it was
1996,
before the leaky building syndrome, wasn't it?
I'm not an expert in that area, but I believe
that
so.
was 2000 that kicked in, and we had to do a weather tightness matrix with our consents. But I see the building has eaves, has
Not,
protection. No, right.
not really, no.
Is the foundation okay?
Well, we haven't done any testing on the foundation, but we know the foundation's low lying, and so we would have to do something. The options are either to raise the building by 250 mil and put a concrete nib around, which would be expensive.
So by
very
low
expensive.
lying, you mean that it's in a sort of ponding area?
I mean that if you look at the building, the slab, the land, the surrounding land is higher, so we would have to.
So
If we were to keep the building as it was using the existing slab, we would have to do some groundworks to get the water to go away from the building and drain and associated drainage.
with building costs nowadays, Dave, about it's over 5,000 a metre, isn't it? So anything could be considered, couldn't it, with the existing foundation? Okay, can you excavate the land around it? It seems to be up on a.
I think if you go and have a wander around and look at it, it's pretty flat there. So it would be I think a bit of a major undertaking.
Right. Thank you.
Justin?
Just double check, is this a closed briefing?
No, we're live streaming.
Okay. Thank you for this, Dave, and I just note, there will be maybe some pushback from people wanting to not demolish this. There's no mention on here of its earthquake proneness. Has that been assessed, and to what level?
Yes, from memory, it's above 67%. It is only a lightweight timber frame building, so yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
but that has been done, yes.
So that's just the general assessment, not the detailed one?
Yeah, just
Okay.
an ISA, I think it was.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Shelley?
Within this research and strategy, I don't know how much was spent on doing this, but have we considered what the development that's going on? Was that coming in the next slides, and what potential is beyond us building a building that's 1 story or 2 story and getting investors in to add to that on land that we own and actually build more on that space?
We haven't gone down that path, no.
Why not? When we've got a precinct development plan. Have we not got a precinct development plan? No?
Sean would like to
Yes,
answer
we
that.
have. We have. So there is, at a high level, there's a plan that shows that area and spatially what you might provide on it. Until we make a decision as to what we're going to do, we haven't gone into any detailed conversations about what might be provided. At the end of the slides, you'll see there's some recommendations for next steps. One of those is to look at alternatives and look at that type of scenario would be part of that work. So at the moment, today is really just the first step to move to the next stage, which is the demolishing the building. Obviously, is a big part of that, and seismically, the weather tightness issues trump the seismic issues. So regardless of where it sits on that scale, it's not fit for purpose because of that issue. So no, councillor, certainly that would be something we'd look at as part of the next stage in terms of. That's probably more about funding and location.
So yeah, I had another question just in relation to down in Porirua. You're probably familiar with the Te Rapaha Arena down there, which is a sport and rec centre and a lot more beside. I'm just wondering, like in terms of where Kathy's going on some of this stuff, how much, is there enough space? How big is the footprint beyond what's currently there? And is there sufficient land to be able to build something on that kind of scale? I mean,
So
it's quite
are you
large.
talking, is there space for us to build something the size of Te Rapara?
Oh no, that's
Arena?
yeah, that's pretty big. But no, something that would say had it like a sports and rec centre, for instance, that it could accommodate that, and then you, if you're able to go up some floors, that it can accommodate stuff. So is there that's a bit of a catch-all down there.
I think you're, as Sean said, we're going to talk about next steps, and that
Yeah.
would be an option we would look at. There is land there. We own quite a bit of land, and that's part of what we're doing with the Wellington Company.
Yeah. Okay.
Kathy?
I'm sorry, so I'll ask my question now that Councillor Wilson has brought it up. But just wondering, have you considered including the community centre in the new indoor sports and recreation centre that is needed in the community instead of having two separate buildings? Because financially it would make sense, and maybe I could help you raise the rest of the money to join both together.
Sean would like to answer that question.
So we're coming back to you with a briefing to talk about the feasibility study on the indoor sports facility, and that will be absolutely part of that conversation, is to look at how you might complement that structure with some other community facility. So yes, it will be coming back to have a conversation, and we can show you what that might look like, but it wasn't the topic for today, but it's absolutely in the mix.
Rob?
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I see the recommendation is to demolish the building, and I accept that the ground level is high in relative to the finished floor level. But also, I was asked to actually look at this building at the previous triennium by the Mayor with respect to this, and on the basis of that, can I just ask again? The ground seems to have been built up in the front of it to gain, ease of access into the front of it. So I think that, we could perhaps look at a bit of excavation around the edge. And have you looked at taking all the monolithic claddings off, drying it out, and putting weatherboards on, and just increasing the eaves and areas, verandas and things like that? Is it the planning? Well, I replanned it, of course, inside, but I just wondered if that report went anywhere. But
Yeah, so
I just thought I'd raise the question because it's a big thing to demolish it, and $7 million spent on rebuilding it. To me, it's just just a big question.
So what we've heard from staff is that they've done a comprehensive analysis on the state of the building, and their advice to us is that the best option right now is to demolish. I don't know if there's any further information you could give to Councillor Cofer to,
Just
not now necessarily,
okay.
but just to appease his concerns around
Look,
that.
I'm certainly happy to go through what it would take to remediate the building, which is quite extensive indeed. Yeah.
Yeah, so would you be happy with that, Councillor
Yeah,
Cofer? We'll take this
that's fine.
offline, and
Okay, thank you.
we can get some further information to him, seeing as he's familiar with the facility and wants that extra information. Jocelyn?
Thank you. So just following up on that, so you have looked at options of retaining the building, and they haven't flown?
Well, we certainly have looked at the options of remediating the building. It is still quite a high cost in the millions and millions of dollars, and the what we would have to do is quite extensive. But also, I think we just have to go back to the point around the weather tightness, and you would still have that same complex building envelope, which would be susceptible to weather tightness issues.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there don't seem to be any further questions, so we'll move on to the next bit.
Right. Michelle.
Thank you.
So I'll just introduce to those who have not met Michelle before. I think you were all here at the workshop, but Michelle from Mobius has come to report back on the needs assessment we had done.
Thanks for that. Well, thanks, Dave. Well, hi, everybody. Again, I think the last time we met was around the 2nd or 3rd of November. So we've come a long way since then. We've completed the needs assessment. There is a full report, a full draft report available. What we've got here are some, I apologise in advance, some sort of detailed slides, but if you don't focus too much on what's written up there and maybe just listen, then I can get across some of those key points for you. So I'm just going to work through some of these earlier slides. We've just got just a quick table of contents, briefly talk about the objectives, well, not the objectives because Dave's already talked about that, but the approach. We also did quite a lot of reviewing of your strategic documents, so I've just got one slide to summarise that and the future growth in the Kāpiti area. Talk a little bit about existing facilities because obviously they're a consideration in this whole process. Talk about Newhanga, what people used to think of it, what they think of the potential of a redeveloped Newhanga community centre. And also we have an overarching recommendation for you, but we've also thought about a whole range of other considerations, and that includes the recreation centre as well. So we'll take you through those as we work through. So look, I'm not going to cover off the objectives again. Did a piece of research to find out what the community think they would like to see with Newhanga. And look, I'm really sorry for all of this wording, but what I can say here is we had a lot of engagement in this project. The community were really interested in giving feedback and taking part. And we also worked quite hard to make sure that we didn't just use traditional channels, you know, where you tend to get traditional people coming back and giving you feedback. So we went out into communities and we collected contact details, and we tried to make sure that the people participating weren't just squeaky wheels and the people that always participate in council surveys. So I guess just to summarise, we spent quite a bit of time talking with council staff members across a range of different areas, which you'll see up there: economic development, libraries, strategy, research and policy. We had the workshop with elected representatives, which most of you took part in. 615 people took part in our online community survey, which we think is a fantastic response rate for Kāpiti, given that we don't have access to people's email addresses as we might do for other types of surveys. So this is all work on the ground trying to get people to take part. We also conducted 58 intercept and in-depth interviews with members of the community, so people who don't go online, who wouldn't answer an online survey. We wanted to make sure that we captured their feedback as well. We conducted 45 interviews with social and community organisations across the area, and this also included organisations who may be Wellington-based, who come up into Kāpiti to deliver their services as well. 25 social and community organisations took feedback in a very short online survey, and everyone in that survey was offered the opportunity to take part in a conversation with us if they wanted to. And we also undertook engagement with iwi, which included a workshop and interviews as well. So we talked to a lot of people. You know the catchment areas which were included in the survey, they're listed up there. We didn't include Otaki because it's just too far away, but if anyone from Otaki wanted to participate, we didn't exclude them either. And we did have people from Otaki taking part, and they tended to be people that had used the Newhanga Kāpiti Community Centre in the past. So overall, a really great response to this piece of work. So just really briefly, we reviewed a lot of strategic documents just to make sure that we weren't reinventing the wheel, that we understood the focus of council. And I think two key themes that came out of these documents were that community, and this is all information that is set out in those documents, community facilities are a key part of the well-being and sense of belonging experienced by Kāpiti residents. They also play a key role in creating a vibrant, diverse and thriving Kāpiti, and it's been well documented across a number of different areas, all documents all prepared by council. What we found overall was that those two themes are pretty consistent with what we heard from your community, what they are looking for from a community facility. This includes members of the community as well as all of the community organisations that we took part, we conducted interviews with, so lots of consistency. Another key finding is that while there are quite a range of community facilities in the Kāpiti area, most of them are currently operating, most if not all are currently operating as venues for hire. So that's one of the key gaps that we found as part of this project. There are no standalone community centres which are open, places that people can come and spend time, drop-in centres, places that can showcase the Kāpiti community and the various activities that are undertaken here. Overall, there was very strong support for a community facility in Kāpiti, which would have the potential to bring the community together. Iwi were also very supportive of the concept of a redeveloped community centre, but did clarify that the marae will always be the key cultural hub for iwi. So we also have a section in our report which looks at the projected growth in Kāpiti. All of these figures were provided by council. None of this is a surprise to you. The Kāpiti community is set to grow with a shift from around 58,000 in 2023 up to over 80,000 people in 2054. This is likely to have an impact on the demand for flexible and affordable community spaces moving forward. Population increases are predicted to be across all age groups, but significantly across older age groups, but definitely across all age groups as well. There's also a number of high-density housing developments planned for Kāpiti, in particular in Paraparaumu. What we've found in other centres across New Zealand is that the more high-density housing areas you have, the more people need to seek community spaces outside of their homes. The whole quarter acre section concept is really shifting. So the more high density, the more you need for spaces outside of the home for people to access. So existing facilities. Oh, super sorry about the very small wording here. We looked at documents which outlined all of your existing community facilities. You'll know that there are 9 council-owned community facilities, which are mainly halls. And this includes an Otaki, and that 9 also includes Newhanga. So there are 7 community facilities currently active and operating within the catchment zone for this project. What we saw in your documentation is that there are a number of issues associated with your existing 7 facilities in the catchment area, and they include, among other things, the inability for them to be adapted for technology and for future growth and future use. There are a range of internal configurations that aren't very flexible, so there's a lot of feedback around the way these facilities are actually able to be used, and it's not very efficient for a lot of organisations. Sometimes only one organisation can come in and use a facility at a time, so they're not ideal. I think a key point is really that we found in your documentation is that most of them have a very limited remaining life. Between 4 and 8 years for most of them, and that was information that was recorded in 2023, so a relatively short predicted remaining life for these facilities. There are, of course, quite a lot of non-council-owned facilities across the Kāpiti area. There's a lot of schools and church facilities. Not unlike other parts of New Zealand where we've conducted similar studies, school and church facilities tend to be really well utilised, really hard to get bookings in. School facilities are mainly used by schools, Schools take precedence, so it's really hard to get consistent, regular bookings. Church facilities are also pretty well used as well. And you'll know there are a lot of church groups who don't have their own churches, so they tend to take up a lot of space in other churches and in school halls and in other facilities at different times of the day and week. There are also a whole range of other meeting rooms across Kāpiti. Many of them are prohibitive for community groups because they are too expensive. So they're not offering community rates for community organisations. There's lots of commercial, businessy style meeting rooms. So I can honestly say there's no shortage of meeting rooms, but they don't necessarily fit the types of people that might have historically used Te Newhanga Community Centre. So we've got mixed levels of reported capacity across the non-council owned facilities. We've got mixed reported anecdotal satisfaction. Some people not very happy, some people were okay, too expensive for some, not accessible for others, too noisy. Lots and lots of feedback about these facilities, and generally some affordability issues. So there are two further facilities that we really need to mention here that are most similar to Te Newhanga, and particularly the way Te Newhanga was most recently run, which was as a venue for hire rather than as a community centre for the community to come in and spend time. So these are the Kāpiti Impact Hub. We spent a lot of time over at the Kāpiti Impact Hub, and also the Ocean Road Community Centre at Parapara Umu Beach. We also spent some time there. Current hirers of both of these facilities include previous hirers of Te Newhanga. So there has been a shift away. People who could no longer hire Te Newhanga have had to look for alternative locations. Some have gone to the Impact Hub. Fewer have gone to Ocean Road. Ocean Road was, you'll know, was originally a senior citizens centre, and that tends to be, users tend to be dominated more by senior citizens groups at the moment, like Probus, Rebus. I know they have plans to expand to encourage more users, but at the moment those tend to be the groups that dominate. Both of these facilities have told us that they still have additional capacity, so I think that's important to mention. But neither of them are staffed as active community centres, so they're both effectively venues for hire. You book a room, you go in there, you use the room, you leave. There's no drop-in centre, there's no space for people to come and spend time, there's no space for local people to showcase arts and culture, which is something that came out as something the community are looking for as well. Anecdotal feedback about these venues as venues for hire was generally positive, not exclusively positive. There's a bit of negativity evident as well, which is mainly to do with location, parking, accessibility, accessibility to bus routes, accessibility for some types of people, older people who might not drive, who need access to facilities in good locations, and so forth. So Te Newhanga. Just really quickly, Te Newhanga was a well-regarded community facility by the Kāpiti community. It was used for a wide variety of programs and activities. We've got large lists of these in our report, but we haven't reiterated them here. Many community members reported attending events or activities or classes or meetings or ceremonies at Te Newhanga over many years. So just over 83% of survey participants told us that they were aware of Te Newhanga. Of those 83%, 66 had at least at some stage attended something at Te Newhanga. Some had only gone once for a particular reason, others had gone on a more regular basis. We got lots and lots of examples of the sorts of things that people used to do there, not just in our survey, but as an example, we approached, I think, something like 150 people at the Strawberry Festival that we attended late last year, and we got a lot of people that talked about, oh yeah, I remember going to a te reo class there, and I remember attending a mother's coffee group there. So lots and lots of examples. A key strength of Te Newhanga was that it was considered to be an open, welcoming and really friendly environment. People were very, very positive about the feel of the centre, less so about the outside of the building, but certainly inside and the way it was run and managed, the feedback was very, very positive. In fact, the only group of people we spoke to that loved the outside of the building was the Paraparaumu Bridge Club, who thought it would matched in really nicely with their facility. So they didn't want to see it change too much, but mainly for that reason. The green space around Te Newhanga was also considered to be a really positive feature. People talked about that indoor-outdoor flow and how better use even could be made of the outside area. It's a really beautiful outside area. It's a wonderful green space, and people talked about that a lot. It was considered to have a great range of meeting rooms and spaces. People were really comfortable there. And the main reason among people we spoke to who had never attended an event or activity at Te Newhanga was they didn't really know what was on offer there. Also, it's not relevant for everybody, to be honest. Some people are just not going to go to a community centre. Or we also spoke to a range of people who had moved to Kāpiti since Te Newhanga had closed. So it was great to get their feedback as well. I'm not going to read all these out. We've got about 600 or 700 lines of comments. So I've just put a few comments up here for you to have a look at. Yeah, they will all be available if you wanted to browse them at some stage. But they talked very much, very, very positively about the building, about the previous community centre and the way it was run, acknowledging that the way it has been operating has changed over several years, and how they feel about community facilities in general. We did get some feedback about Te Newhanga that people had a sense that it lacked a sort of a clear purpose. So there was a little bit of feedback about that, and I think that was mainly to do with the fact that the way it's operated over the last several years has changed a bit. So it's gone from having an on-site manager who people talked about and mentioned by name, Pat, I believe. Pat came up a lot, as well as other people associated with the centre. Then it was operating as just a venue for hire. It was operating as a permanent space for some organisations. We had quite a few people who said, oh, that's the food bank, pointing to it, thinking it was the food bank when the food bank was there. So that organisation tended to dominate the centre a little bit. And most recently, it's been a council-facilitated drop-in centre. We had really good feedback about people's experiences attending some of those drop-in events, and of course the Meanwhile space has been operating for a while, and again anecdotally feedback about the Meanwhile space has been really, really positive. Some people felt that the layout didn't work very effectively as a drop-in space. The configuration of the rooms and the access between the rooms wasn't felt to work as well as it could, so maybe there would be, depending on what you decide, some opportunity to re-look at the layout so that the flow works a little bit better. I mentioned the feedback about the Kāpiti food bank. So I guess, if a future decision is ever made to house community organisations in there on a permanent basis, consideration would need to be given to how that would actually work and fit in with other uses of the centre. There was also feedback that it wasn't very well marketed, and that there is an opportunity for, to really communicate the sorts of things that could be done there. I know this all takes money and resource, but a facilitated centre, a well-managed centre that's well marketed and well promoted potentially has a lot of opportunity to attract members of the community. Rather than a building that just sits there and, build it and they will come. Right, support for a redeveloped space. Sorry, my graphs are so small. We asked people whether they thought that community spaces like Te Newhanga are important. We asked this on a scale from 0 to 10, with 0 being not at all important and 10 being extremely important. Over 90% of survey participants said that they felt that community spaces like Te Newhanga are important spaces. So those are people that gave a score of 7 to 10 out of 10. 65% gave a score of 10 out of 10. So strong community support for community space like Te Newhanga. Just looking at the Māori results here, slightly more Māori taking part in this research thought that community spaces like Te Newhanga are important or very important. We've got a few different breakdowns of the areas, but I've only got one slide here. When we look at the importance of community spaces across the catchment, interestingly, the people in Paikokariki think they're the most important. People in Peka think they're the least important, which is really interesting. But scores there are pretty high. Paikokariki before Parapara Umu, then Parapara Umu Beach, down to Waikanai, Raumati, Otaki, etc., etc. We can break down any of these results by area if anyone's interested. We have done this in the report, but we can look at further breakdowns if you're interested. So why are community spaces important? This really just summarises the key themes in the verbatim comments that we received. So they're important because they create a sense of belonging. Community spaces can strengthen communities if they're done properly. They offer low-cost or subsidised spaces for community organisations, which means that community organisations can offer low-cost and subsidised services and activities and programs for members of the community. They contribute to a healthy society, so societal health and well-being. They can bring diverse groups of people together. These are all comments from the community. They can be safe spaces. So community spaces can be safe for any member of the community. Anyone is welcome. And they can also serve as central sources of information, which is, again, one of the key gaps that was identified as part of this study. In terms of the community knowing what's out there, community services, social services, some of the feedback was it's very difficult to find information. There's no central source of information. You can go online, there's like lists of services and lists of facilities, but it's not community friendly. It's more like a directory. So potentially there's an opportunity for a physical space to actually do some of that work. Okay. Some more quotes. As I said, we've got hundreds and hundreds of them, which you can review at your leisure. We wanted to look specifically at people who had never heard of Te Newhanga or had never visited Te Newhanga, because we wanted to make sure that we weren't just talking to the people that already loved it and used it and knew it. But we got a lot of support from people that don't tend to use community spaces. They saw the value of a community space, even if it might not necessarily be right for them at this time in their life. They certainly understood that there is value in community spaces for other members of the community. So 189 people taking part in the survey had never heard of and had never attended anything at Te Newhanga. 3/4 of them said that they thought community spaces like Te Newhanga were still important, even if they'd never heard of it or had never been there. They gave us a whole lot of reasons why. When we asked people to give us a numerical score, we asked them why. Why are you saying that? Explain the reason for your answer, just so that we could get some clarification. So again, we've got 189 comments around why community spaces are important for communities. Okay. We also said, well, are there enough community spaces in Kāpiti? We wanted to make sure that we balanced our engagement as well. So, sorry, my scores are terribly small here. Around 1/3 of people disagreed that there were enough community spaces in Kāpiti. So that's kind of a double negative. They thought that there weren't enough. That's what they're telling us. We had a few people in the middle, around another third, who were kind of neutral on this or weren't too sure. And then we had smaller numbers who said that they agreed that there were enough community spaces in Kāpiti. So again, we said, well, why? Why do you think there aren't enough? Why do you think there are enough? There aren't enough, according to your community, because community spaces at the moment are quite spread out and they're quite hard to find. We're talking about rooms in various places across the community, or halls, or we've got the two major centres, which is the Kāpiti Impact Hub and the Ocean Road Community Centre. A lot of people had never heard of the Ocean Road Community Centre. We're not familiar with that place. Why else did they tell us there aren't enough? They felt that current community spaces weren't fit for purpose. We got a lot of anecdotal feedback about why they didn't like going to certain community spaces. For example, cold, drafty, old halls that are past their use-by date, noise issues, difficult to get bookings, hard to get to, not disability friendly, difficult for people who might not have access to a car to get to, so lots of reasons like that. They also said that there aren't enough spaces because there is no drop-in space. There's nowhere that they can go and spend time without having to actually sign up for a particular event or activity. Kāpiti also was seen as having fewer intergenerational spaces than other places. People talked very much about a lack of spaces for youth here. But I have to say, and this is one of our kind of consideration points, a redeveloped community centre is not necessarily going to meet the needs of youth. When we talk, it's interesting, you talk to adults about youth needs and they say, oh, youth need a community centre where they can go and hang out and spend time. Youth say, no, we want to go rock wall climbing, and we want to do this and we want to do these activities. So I think that's an important thing to think about, just in terms of the goal of a redeveloped community centre being an intergenerational space. They also felt that less centralised options do create barriers for people. So we have a slide on the location, but the current location was considered to be an excellent location, great proximity to buses and other forms of public transport. There's reasonably good parking. It's also, this is about as much of a hub as you're going to get. There's the library, there's the aquatic centre, there's outdoor space, there's the council building, so it's close to coastline, so it's a really great central location for people. So why did people think that there is a good range? Well, I think I have to admit that people got a bit confused by our question here. So when we looked at people who gave scores of 7 to 10, and those are people who thought there were enough spaces, some of the comments didn't match up. I think people got confused. I think they were answering it in a slightly different way, which is why it's great to be able to cross-reference against the comments. So a lot of people who gave a score of 7 or 10 were actually in favour of a community space. But other reasons why people think there's a good range include they feel that current spaces are not well utilised. They think that there are a lot of clubs and sports activities for people in Kāpiti, remembering that clubs and sports activities aren't for everybody, they're for some people. And other people said there's plenty to do if you look. If you look hard, there's lots of things to do, so we don't need anything else. We didn't get that much pushback on, it's not core business, council shouldn't be wasting money, a couple of comments, but not a lot of pushback. We talked to a range of social and community organisations specifically looking at social needs in Kāpiti. The social needs in Kāpiti are no different to the social needs that impact every other community in New Zealand. But the social needs gaps that are most relevant to any consideration about a community space were really to do with the fact that there is no community space that operates as a managed community centre. Again, that isn't just a venue for hire, which can be a little bit impersonal. So no drop-in space, no space where the community know to go or can be encouraged to go to or facilitated to go to. And I think that's a really important caveat. any kind of drop in space, any community space does have to be managed and facilitated. They're not just going to turn up to an empty space and sit down and have a cup of coffee. It's got to be promoted. It's got to be managed. Social and community organisations also reported difficulty in finding low-cost space to rent or to lease on a permanent basis, particularly to lease on a permanent basis. A lot of the feedback we got was that their current lease prices are quite expensive. They're becoming really prohibitive. Some also said that it's really difficult finding low-cost space to hire for workshops, meetings, activities, training. It's interesting, there are lots of spaces across Kāpiti, which we have talked about, but they're not always available on a consistent basis, so it's really hard to get that continuity. And I think we still need to point out that even if you rebuilt a community space, they may not have access to spaces on a consistent basis there either, depending on how popular it is. They also, some of the other gaps they talked about was a lack of networking opportunities. So there's a feeling that a community space has an opportunity to actually help to coordinate, for them to kind of talk to each other and coordinate among themselves. And I'm not talking about just offering permanent space for them, but they talk very much about opportunities for hot desking, or maybe having, you know, on a Thursday from 10 till 2, you can come in and access this service, and then on a Friday from 9 till 11, you can access this service. So there were lots of examples about the sorts of things that could actually be run out of that centre, including the CAB, and I know that this has already been discussed quite a lot already, but there was strong interest for a CAB type service to go in there. Social and community organisations, just in terms of gaps again, because as I say, there are social needs gaps, but these are things that are outside of council's remit. So we've tried to focus on the gaps that are relevant to this sort of our community space. So another one is that social and community organisations in Kāpiti feel that they lack visibility. They're very spread out. There's no sort of central source, as I've already said, no central source of information for the community to be able to access these services. The reasons given by community organisations were almost identical to the feedback that came out of the survey, so I won't spend too much time on them. Again, it's all about vibrant communities, safe spaces, sources of information, reasonable cost facilities, strength of belonging, strengthening communities. Oh, lots of wording there. Community organisations also spent a lot of time making commentary on the things that we were asking them. We also have a long list of feedback from community and social organisations, which we have shared. Location I've already talked about. We said if, and we were really careful not to kind of, we were careful not to set any expectations. We knew we needed to manage expectations. Because, you know, when you go out to a community and you ask them what they want, they're going to tell you, and then they expect you to build it pretty much straight away. So we were pretty clear, but we did say if a community space was built in Kāpiti or was redeveloped in Kāpiti, what do you think of the current location, the location where Newhanga currently is? 77% of people said that this is the right location. Main reasons were that it's part of that hub I already talked about. It's really close to public transport, so it's really accessible. Accessibility was considered really key. One of the negatives of the Kāpiti Impact Hub was accessibility. Even though it's not very far away, that was probably the biggest complaint we got, that it's not an accessible location. The parking's not good. At night time, it doesn't feel particularly safe for people. The experiences within the building itself are very, very positive, but there are a number of barriers for certain members of the community to go over there and use that facility. Parking is generally pretty good around here. We got a few people who told us it was terrible, but you know, you can't please everybody. And yeah, it's accessible to people, including from other parts of Kāpiti. So people coming from, you know, Paikokariki or Raumati. So our recommendation, based on the feedback from this community and social needs assessment, our recommendation is that consideration be given to the redevelopment of the Newhanga Kāpiti Community Centre, and that consideration be given to its redevelopment as a community hub, not just as another venue for hire. There are plenty of venues for hire in Kāpiti. So as far as key gaps go, there is a key gap in terms of a central, open and welcoming community facility that can be used for a range of different purposes, depending obviously on resource and budget, and I'll take you through some of those in just a second. No, we would be remiss making a recommendation if we didn't, and I'm sorry, this is super small, if we didn't also flag some considerations, I think really important. We recommend that consideration be given to the outcome of the feasibility study for the planned indoor or potentially planned indoor recreation centre. I've seen some preliminary plans, and I can see that there is some community space that has been thought about for that facility. So certainly, and given the fact that it's going to be in close or potentially going to be in close proximity to where Newhanga currently is, you have to consider what that might look like as a combined community space recreation centre. Consideration also needs to be given to how the hub of community facilities around here could be better connected. At the moment, feedback is that they are quite a bunch of disconnected spaces. So there's possibly an opportunity to really create more of an active hub in this location, which may be, wayfinding or pathways or something physical that actually connects these spaces, including the aquatic centre. Consideration also needs to be given to what the Wellington Company is planning to do. We tried to speak to the Wellington Company, but we unfortunately didn't receive any response. Look, they're planning something big. I can see online that they're talking about building community spaces, so you really need to think about what they're going to be doing as well, because that's all part of this context. Also need to think about how that green space, if you do look at building some kind of community space, how that green space could be better incorporated. You've got a really unique open space out there, which is people are very, very positive about. So that also needs to be considered. Consideration also needs to be given to the operating model. I would say if you're going to potentially look at something as another venue for hire, then the community, it's likely to not deliver on the gaps that we've talked about. So that operating model with all the, the resource considerations that come along with it would need to be considered. And that's a real commitment. If you're going to be talking about an open space that's all welcoming for people, that's something that needs to be committed to. Consideration also needs to be given to the wider role any redeveloped community space might play. We got a lot of people talking about the fact that there's a lack of arts and culture spaces in Kāpiti, and that there is an opportunity to maybe, within reason, incorporate some of this into a redeveloped community space. So use it as a space that might showcase local arts and culture. Make it, I know you mentioned a Guggenheim, we're not quite talking about that, but a statement piece for Kāpiti. And I'm fully aware that everything costs money and everything takes time. So this is what the communities say they want. It'll come down to what can actually be afforded, but an opportunity to do something a little bit special there, to make it unique, to make it a central point for Kāpiti, because there isn't anything at the moment. We also think that the impact of any redeveloped community space on those other spaces, the Ocean Road Community Centre and the Kāpiti Impact Hub, should be taken into consideration. It's likely that there might be some shifts between spaces. That's certainly some of the feedback that we've had. So I think consideration needs to be given to the impact on those other places. Also, this issue of Kāpiti youth, I think I see lots of documentation around this desire to have an intergenerational space. Based on the feedback, particularly from youth, I'm not sure that's a really realistic goal. that a community centre can actually deliver on. Youth don't want, there's already a drop-in space for youth here. It's not for everybody, but it certainly works well for the people that like it. I think just that whole, you see a lot of stuff around intergenerational uses and multi-purpose uses and council documentation. I think we need to think about what youth actually want, and it's potentially not a community centre. Right. Just to quickly wrap up. So look, strong interest and really strong participation in this facility or in a potentially redeveloped space. Strong support from a community perspective for a space that is more managed rather than as a venue for hire. Strong support for its location, very strong support for its location. Strong support for better integration of this whole area, including the green space, including the library, all of the facilities that are around here. People who had never used it are also supportive of a redeveloped community space. So I think it's important to consider those people as well. We didn't get people who said, I'm never going to use it and I don't want it as part of this piece of research. A key gap is there is no community space that isn't a venue for hire, and further gaps came out from social and community organisations, which we've already talked about, and that's that lack of coordination, fragmentation, opportunities for resource sharing. In an ideal world, they would love you to have a space where they could share photocopying equipment and spaces to store their gear and, drop in and drop out of so that the community could drop in and drop out as well. So those are the key gaps that the community raised. Was that too quick? I whipped through that. I hope.
It certainly wasn't. No, it was perfect. So I had Bernie's hand up before. I'm not sure if your hand was up from the previous session, Bernie, or you wanted to ask a question. So I'll let... Are you there? He's probably gone. No, he's there. I can see. It says Bernie's.
Yeah, I'm here.
Did you have some? I think your hand was up from the beginning of the presentation.
No, yeah, it's in the first slide.
Right. So we're
Way
just
back
gonna,
then.
before we take questions on this, we're just gonna go backtrack a little bit, and that was the building assessment stuff. First slide. So I missed Bernie's hand, and by that time we'd kind of launched into the second thing, and I didn't want to.
Okay. So, Madam Chair, the two comments I have, if it's going to be a two-storey building, then there should be provision for a lift, for disabled people, so they can get up to the second floor. I presume that's basic. And then secondly, there should be a stage. Like the best hall I've seen is the Baptist Church Hall stage at Waikanai. And that place has never had a stage there, and a small stage, I think, would be good. Could be used for other facilities. And thirdly, it is or was a civil defence hub. That's important, and no one has mentioned that. That's all.
Thank you, Bernie. They're three really good comments. Do you want any feedback on any of those? More feeding in?
No. Just for consideration.
That's great. Thanks, Bernie. So I've got Liz next.
Yep. Thank you. So I just want to start by saying I've been involved in managing the Ocean Road Community Centre for about 10 years or so, and I had 2 or 3 years on the Newhanga committee, and I'm currently also renting out the key to space down at the airport. So I do have a bit of an overview of what happens in that space. So a couple of points. One is Ocean Road Community Centre is run by a group of very ageing trustees who have had some initial discussions with the chief executive about potentially passing over the management of that facility to council. And I do want to add also that the centre had just been through a big renovation, and there were plans done initially to build another whole wing out the back of that centre, so there is room to expand. The only constraint on that is that it is on reserve land, and there's a limitation around how much, the ratio between building space and reserve land So whether that's a limitation, and also at the time we had objections from the neighbours to that wing being put out, although those people have since moved into a retirement village or something like that. So, but I guess what I'm saying is that there is potential room to expand that. I guess you could even put another story on the top, I don't know. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, I think we need to clearly distinguish between rooms for hire and a drop-in centre, and there are different strategies for each. And I've made this point around this council table before, because I constantly get phone calls from people saying, you know, I need a room for blah, blah, blah. We need an online presence that brings together all the rooms for hire, venues for hire in Kāpiti, and promotes public events on there as well, so that people know what's on. So if someone's looking for a room to hold a meeting or to run a course or whatever, they can scan down everything that's available, council, non-council, and for the public who want to know what's on, they can go in and see all the public events that they can enrol for if they wish to. To me, that's a no-brainer to get that sorted before we start building centres, because we do have underutilised space. Ocean Road is an example of that. A lot of the groups that use Ocean Road are in decline because, again, they're older people, as you mentioned, and they can't afford to pay the rent. And we've had to put the rent up because insurance has gone up, et cetera, and the complaints are, deafening. You know, we can't afford to pay, an extra couple of dollars a session, whatever. So I think in terms of rooms for hire, we need to max out the capacity that we already have by promoting what's available, having a website, having a central hub, virtual hub that people can go to for that information. So that deals with that side of it. Then there's the drop-in facility, which needs to be manned and probably needs a cafe and some free activities coordinated, whether it's art workshops or whatever. My grandchildren are in Sydney, and there's a number of places my daughter goes to with the kids, which are commercially run cafes, but they have playground equipment and stuff so mums can go there, have a cup of coffee, and there's stuff for the littlies, the preschoolers and that to do. So, that sort of thing, plus some other free activities. So I think to me, it makes sense to separate out those two streams and deal with them differently, so that, the drop-in centre might easily be located with the indoor rec centre, for example, and maybe not have a lot of hired out, rooms to hire thing, because that's already catered for with other facilities around the place. Or, it might have just, 1 or 2 rooms for hire or something like that. But I think, we've got to get better mileage out of what exists there now. And, I know with Ocean Road, there's some concern around the usage dropping because a lot of groups, are now struggling to get members. So the usage is coming more from people who are running commercial businesses, they're running workshops or running business meetings. That's where the usage is coming from in terms of future growth, rather than membership groups that are really struggling, Rotary Lions, all those sort of things. So I would like to see an immediate investment while we're still thinking about Te Newhanga in terms of building that online presence and letting people know what's available and where. In terms of Te Newhanga, a lot of people found it hard to find or didn't know where it was. They might have heard the name, but they said, how the heck do I find it? Because it wasn't well signposted and all that kind of thing. So that needs to be addressed. But yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
I think some of the feedback about Ocean Road, it was positive, but at the moment the room configuration is one small room and one very, very large room.
Yeah.
And a lot of the groups that we spoke to who struggled, they all eventually find space to hire. They do, but generally they're not satisfied with the space that they find to hire. So some of the spaces are just too big, and they don't work well for some groups. They're not nice, intimate spaces, or they're too cold, and so on. Others are. One group I can think of in particular who used to use Te Newhanga now use the aquatic centre,
Yeah.
But it doesn't work because it's next to the spa pool and it's
smells,
so
isn't it?
so they find places eventually. I agree that there's no sort of central source of information for sure, and it will certainly make it easier. But often the feedback is we found a space, but we don't really like it. As well.
Yeah, but as I say, I think like with Ocean Road, there is potential to add more rooms
Sure.
out the back of
Yep.
a medium size.
Yeah.
I mean, and actually, the fact that that place has got quite a big room is an advantage because there are people who want to have like a one-day workshop for 20 people or something, and it's hard to find spaces for that.
It is.
So it's horses for courses, and I think it's about knowing, because people don't know what's there, and often when I get calls from people, I say, is this suitable for blah, 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 and so it's about, you need to have a search function where you say, I want to run a workshop for 20 people, what are the options for where I can go, or something like that, it's just, there's so much more you could do to just increase the visibility.
Yeah, it's not an easy piece of work that you're suggesting, because where do you draw the line? There's churches, there's schools, there's so much out there. And as for being an events promotion website, there is so much happening. I know the people who only do classical music concerts, and that's quite a lot of work on its own. There's just so much happening. And as soon as you start doing that, let me finish, as soon as you start doing that, if you miss somebody, they say, why did you promote this event and not my event? So, I mean, I know you say it's a no-brainer, but to me, it's something that's worth considering, and we'd have to decide on the scope and scale of it, and what's included, what's not included, and also how we're going to find the capacity to actually deliver that piece of work, because it's not simple. It's actually not simple.
Can I just say, with a website like that, it would have to, the content for it would have to be generated by the people who are registered on it. So you'd have a secure login. So like Ocean Road Community Centre would have its own login and would update its own stuff on there. So it wouldn't require necessarily a lot of council resource. It would just be a platform that people could.
Okay, it's a discussion worth having, but it's not a no-brainer, and it's not necessarily as simple as we think it is.
It's not that complicated either.
Yeah. Well, would you like to do it then?
No,
because it's no more council's job than it is yours. It's actually not our job to do that. So it's whether we want to find the capacity in our organisation to deliver what you're suggesting or not. And it's a conversation that's worth having, but it's not an instruction to staff today.
No. But I think the role of council would be to facilitate that, right?
Yeah.
So, but it really needs to
definitely
happen.
worth looking into.
Yeah.
So who have we got next? Martin.
Yeah, look, just certainly supporting Liz's views around the need for that. But I appreciate we need to go through a process around that, which could be part of the revisioning. I'm sure that's going to go. Look, I've got some clarities and a few things. First of all, can we call it something else other than the social needs assessment? Through the health strategy, we're about to do a social needs assessment. I just don't want it to get confused. It could be something called it. You've called it a community needs assessment further on in the document or something. It's only a small thing, but just if we start calling it a social needs assessment, it could crash into an actual wider Kāpiti-wide social needs assessment. That's just in any documentation that goes out would be much appreciated. I just wanted some clarity. The land that it's on, is that council owned, or was it gifted by? Was that a gifted piece of land for the community centre as such, or was it already council owned land as such? Do you know? Anyone know the answer to that at all?
No, you trust.
And they gifted the name.
It's council land, but it's all part of that Public Works Act land that was procured by council many moons ago. In terms of that, there's 3 blocks. The block over here, and then there's another block.
So it's a Public Works Act scenario, okay? Because it was a gifting of the name as such from local hapa, which leads me to my next question. We've talked that iwi were talked to about this, but did we have specific conversations with local hapu, i.e. Pukitapu hapu, and also the hapu that gifted the name, Te Uri Oti Narara?
We certainly reached out to them. I'm not sure if they participated participated though.
No, we spoke to
Te
Tiawa?
Tiawa. We tried really hard to get to get more engagement. I don't know if it was a combination of the time of year. Also, then of course we had Waitangi Day when we came back in February. We certainly offered everyone the opportunity to participate.
So from my end, I can't emphasise the importance of having local hapu involved in this conversation as we move forward. Happy to, I have no idea how to help facilitate that conversation, but I'll try, if any way I can, I'll be more than open to it. Maybe something TV team.
Oh, Maureen wants to.
Am I on? Oh, yeah. The Mobius, as I understand, had a consultant that was engaging with iwi, so we kind of had a step back from this whole needs assessment process by way of the iwi partnerships team. Just FYI.
But
Yep, that's great, but it doesn't really move away from the fact that if we're going to be moving forward in this conversation, that local hapu should be involved in this conversation. That's my opinion, anyway, and I appreciate the parameters that you get for that sort of consultation, but maybe we need to be looking at changing those parameters, because that's a pretty important group, I would have thought, too, especially with regards to the naming side of things. But I appreciate this is not a criticism process of that, that's just feedback.
Maureen or Noria just want to add something?
Kia ora, Martin. That's a great question, and it's a good thing that you raised. I met with some of the whānau from the hapu, and then once we moved into having a representative from iwi, they stepped in, and there was just some whānau situations that happened that they weren't able to engage with the assessment, but we talked about moving forward together with them.
Yeah. Pat Cummings was mentioned, and she was fairly instrumental. Was she targeted for an interview? Was she actually interviewed as part of this process?
No, she wasn't.
Maybe a little bit of an oversight there. That's it for me. Other than that, sorry, great piece of work. It's great to be seeing some movement here, and I'm looking forward to May when we make the decision with regards to how we move forward. And that sort of stuff. I want to see some action here sooner rather than later. Don't we, Kathy? As councillors, this has been going on for a while, but appreciate that we've got a structured process here, and that sort of stuff. We're at the end now where we can actually start making some decisions, which is much appreciated.
Thanks, Martin. Jocelyn?
Yeah, thank you through the chair. Thank you very much for Dave and for particularly Michelle for giving us a really good insight, very rich comments and thoughts on this centre. One of the things that I just wanted to raise is that I think very early in your presentation you made the comment about other facilities in the district and how most of them had quite a short life. And I suppose what I'm looking at a bigger picture here, a strategic picture here in terms of how this actually fits into that strategic plan, both for this proposed new building, but also improvements of those other buildings. And to me, that is something that we need to look at rather than in isolation. And I would actually really like us councillors to have that conversation before we make a decision on this, because obviously putting money into such a facility, it can't be spent elsewhere, and just making sure that it is the best use of the limited funds that we do have. I also note that there was no mention of our library, which is very, very close to this proposed area, and that actually has a lot of facilities as well. So I'm not saying no to this at all, but I just want to see, I'd really like to see how it fits into the whole council facility property management and I suppose improvement funding models.
Just in terms of the library, we did speak to library management. It is I think what we mentioned the library just in the context that it is part of this hub of facilities. The rooms for hire at the library, my understanding is that they are no longer available as spaces for hire. The library is using them, so I think that that's in our report. But yeah, as spaces for hire, they're no longer available.
Yeah. So I think, even though, it sounds like a really good proposal, but like strategically as, elected members, I think it's important to actually understand where this fits into the process along with all those other council facilities. Thank you.
Shelley?
Firstly, I'm disappointed we weren't included in Otaki in the data, and I can understand the separation by distance, but a lot of Otaki people come here to do stuff, and that's just my thoughts are that in most places where you're developing a hub, you have the library as part of the hub. So we're going to have a hub and then a separated library. I'm interested in revisiting how we're using the spaces, and maybe the library could become the indoor rec centre if it's got a long life, it's big enough or whatever, who knows. But also maximising the use of that land by getting development or central government involved in doing more stories, selling off not the land but property, and that will then afford us the services to be free or cheap for the community, because everything we add, we're adding cost. If we don't have anything to pay for that cost, we're just going to have another facility. We've got the one down at Kāpiti College, we've got Mahara Gallery, it's all costing a lot of money. So how do we maximise? Is that one of the options? Coming forward, have we got an option of work with developers, work with central government, maximise the space here, maybe flip things around? I don't know how appropriate the library would be for an indoor rec centre.
Can I just say that the Otaki residents weren't excluded. We just did not specifically target them based on the fact of the transport network, especially being that Otaki is separated, and Otaki does have its own community centre as well.
Yeah.
We did have Otaki residents taking part, so what they told us is included in the report as well. On the library, we had really mixed feedback. Everyone's got lots of ideas. Some people suggested we could just tag on something to the library, just build something on the end, and other people said no, that's not possible. And so I think in those recommendations or considerations at the end of the presentation, we have very much said you need to look at the big picture and look at all of these other planned facilities and think about the whole area, because it's not going to look like this in 15 years' time. So that's definitely part of it.
Yeah, so there was a focus in this survey, it seems to me, on asking about Newhanga and whether we want something similar again. And there was some focus on looking at the wider ecosystem that Jocelyn mentioned, and that Liz has been talking about, of all the venues. But the emphasis seems to have been on the former rather than the latter. And I think what I'm hearing around the table is we're wanting more work on that wider kind of big picture. What have we got? How can we maximise it? Rather than do we want to replace this facility? And that's to do with the brief, it's not to do with the response. But and the work that we've done is useful to feed into that, but I think we need to now look at that second piece more deeply. So I'm remembering, it might have been 10 years ago, we did a review of all the council and non-council facilities. That was run by, I can't remember his name, but it was an in-depth, look at the kind of thing Liz was talking about with all the different facilities. But that's a different piece of work, so I'd quite like to park that now, and let's focus on any questions we have about the presentation today, because we do have another little bit that we've got to get through today as well. So, I mean, it's fantastic. We've asked the right questions for the things we wanted to find out for this piece of work. We've got some other work that we want to do on top of this, but let's stick to what we're talking about today. Nigel?
Yeah, just to quickly agree, I think it is another piece of work. It's a separate piece of work. We'd actually started with Mike Mendonca. Some people might remember him. He used to work here. About the use of public spaces and whether or not we should even be charging for the use of public spaces for community groups. So that was a discussion, because it just tended to be a bit of a money go around and ultimately wasn't particularly effective. In terms of the way to move forward, it strikes me that the best way to move forward is in a bulldozer. What I'm a little bit concerned about is, so you mentioned, CAB could be someone who could use this. That'll be fantastic. The problem is that's in probably, according to this, a minimum of about 6 or 7 years' time. So there, who knows what form any of these organisations will take in that stage. So I see in the budget, in the 27-28 year, there's 365,000. Now, given that that's 3 to 4 years away, so a couple of concerns here. One is that the budget is just a tick under 5.5 million, and that's going out presumably to completion of something. But we've already heard that we're talking about 7 million. So is there another 1.5 million to find, or has that already been accounted for?
I think you might have flicked forward a few slides there.
Yeah, this is near the end.
We haven't quite got there, but
right.
But yeah, you are correct.
Okay, so yes, so that's, for me, that's a bit of a concern, is that we're talking about something that is like a long way away from completion. You're also talking about the difficulty we get in mixing young people with older people. One way you can have that happen successfully is in a sport and recreation centre. You get, again, I don't want to harp on, but the Te Rauparaha Arena in Porirua is a fantastic example of that. You will see a mix right across the board. Everyone's engaging in different things at different times. You got the Rotary clubs in one corner, and you got the Young Larrikins Association over here, and they're all in the same building, having fun, and it's a great community thing. So I think largely about the functions of the building will determine who's using it. So the idea, I would really like to see, and perhaps it is a bigger piece of work, perhaps it's not even appropriate here, but the idea of a sport and rec centre, when that land, if there is land available, is that we, as much as possible, unify this whole area. The library, as interesting as it would be to see indoor football in the library, I prefer that it happens in the Otaki library rather than this one. So as much as possible that we're hubbing, because I think that was the point here. When we talked about, the community, the civic centre, there was a broad plan, and it wasn't just civic centre meaning the council, the dry stuff. It included, I think, more a broader look at what facilities might get used. And given its proximity to Ian Castles, we should, the Ian Castles, Castles. Sorry, deliberate slip. The Ian Castles Sport and Recreation Centre, again, is something that we should really have a conversation about. Now, I don't know if part of the thinking and part of the money, if anybody has gone and knocked on anybody's door and said, hey, how about we call it this, and you chuck a couple of million into the pot. Coaston's generously put up, I think, $500,000 to the aquatic centre.
To everything, basically. To everything, basically.
Yeah. So, there is the potential for some really substantial corporate money to come in, which might actually speed up the whole process as well.
Nice, Nigel. Well done. I don't think we need a response to that unless you want to. No? Rob?
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Oh, Dave and Michelle, that was a really good presentation, thanks. Very clear, and you sold it to me. I'm one of those old people, Papram Rotary Club, we all died, so I'm glad Councillor
you,
Liz is...
clearly.
Oh, yeah, I'm still here. Hey, look, this community facility has been kicked around a lot, and if Ian Castles does do a deal, make sure it's in writing, because Sir Noel Robinson promised us an event centre, so he could put those buildings on our runway, and we're still waiting for that event centre. So it's been a political football, but hey, look, it's really needed. Now to Takahi at Levin, to Takari, sorry, I'll get it right one day. Now that's a good example of an old supermarket, and it's got a mix of ages in there. Works really well. My wife plays for Brasso, and they go up there and do the odd concert there, just impromptu. It's got a cafe. I know it's a library too, but if we had a facility like that, it would be really good, really engaging and exciting. Also, community advice bureau. They really citizens advice bureau. Sorry, people like that. They do need as you say, a secure place so other people can go to them. They're having referrals from police and all sorts of people. So we need Bernie mentioned a little stage, a little sort of, adjustable sort of concert area, but that could be part of the whole thing. Your big square box is looking pretty good. But let's not make it the Guggenheim because they put the windows above the pictures. So apparently Frank Lloyd Wright didn't like modern art, but we won't talk about that. We need this managed facility, and as soon as possible. Just a question, has the operational expenditure been included in your sums there, and how much are we not paying at the moment for the facility we haven't got? So we've got capital expenditure, that's the building and all of that, but we'll have a chat about that later. But operational expenditure, has that been, because you need, if it's managed, which it's going to be, you'll need a little bit to operate it with. Thank you.
The numbers mentioned are just for the building itself. There is no OPEX. We haven't determined which of the operating models might be.
Okay, thank you.
What did Lawrence call it that time? The law of unintended OPEX. Martin?
Yeah, just wanted to drop in a couple of extra things. I think it's going to be very important that we do look at external funding options with regards to partnership with us so that we can stretch a bit further. And I know that from our vision stuff that we are looking at lining up funding opportunities, so really keen to see that going. But also considering the inside-outside flow is going to be very, very important. I look at the meanwhile space that we've got down at the moment, that's fantastic, but also even just having pop-ups. In other words, the buildings that we look at, or whatever we actually look at, needs to be looking at that whole area as such. Just for clarity, the report's coming in on the 30th of May, is that right? Are we receiving the report on the 30th of May? I know still in the thing here that we're talking about making a decision with regards to the demolition of the building or not, but are we receiving the report at that stage?
I think we've got a slide coming on that.
The report will come with the paper, yeah.
Yeah, just checking on that. I thought that might be the case. I just
full
wanted to
decision on the 30th.
Yeah, no, that's cool. A little bit concerned from my end around the longer time frames rather than a shorter time frame being talked to, but appreciate we've got to be looking at the overall area here, which I think is really, really important. And also just wanted to note consideration around Wharemaku Park and talk of a cultural centre. Again, that's that looking at how the whole thing integrates, but quite very much looking forward to seeing how all that works.
Cool. Okay, we'll move on to the next section then.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle. So that's you finished. Thank you for the work that you've done. It's really absolutely outstanding, and talked to a wide range of people and got some really incredible feedback. So thank you. Yeah.
And there is a fairly substantial report behind this with a lot more detail as well. But
we look forward to seeing that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll just thanks, Dave.
Yeah.
Kia ora koutou katoa, ko Nore Parata tōku ingoa. I'm in the connected the Climate Action and Connected Communities team, and I'm an acting advisor, Connected Communities, and I'm here to talk about the Meanwhile space. So I'll just put my slide, there we go. So the Meanwhile space, I'm not sure if you've seen it. It was set up as a temporary measure to bring the community together. We saw I used to facilitate the Newhanga Community Centre. We had a lot of groups of people using that space, and when that place shut down, there's lots of parts of the community that were a little bit dispersed and there wasn't a central meeting point. So we wanted to reinvigorate that space and give people that space to use. It's been built in a flexible way, so that enables us to shift the space and focus through the different stages of the possible redevelopment of Te Newhanga Kāpiti Community Centre and what the future of the centre would be. We did it in collaboration with local community organisations, so we had Kāpiti Art Studio, the Kāpiti Horticulture Society, the Shed Project, the Parurumi Bridge Club, the Youth Council and the Disability Advisory Group. And our team are working together with some community groups and as well as cross-council around what activities we can do to activate the space. Today they had the super parks in that space, and there was a lot of families, grandmothers with their grandchildren using the space, and we had the libraries and the parks team bring their trucks there, which was really cool. So some of the outcomes for this space was about encouraging reconnection. So it was to encourage the community to reconnect with each other, and also Te Newhanga Kāpiti Community Centre to talk about acknowledging the history of the place and how it got there, the community that fundraised to create this space, and also the importance to the hapu. Storytelling in the container, which provides a timeline of the community centre, and I'm still talking to hapu around the opportunities of if they want to talk about the history of the space. We also wanted to create spaces for sharing stories and organic engagement. So on a weekly basis, I've been putting different titles and questions up, and it's been really cool to see people share what they value, how they connect, what they think is important to them. And this creates opportunities for them to share their stories as well. We have created spaces and opportunities for encouraging connections by creating seating and playful spaces, and that's what you can see. So here we got the table tennis. So we're trialling different uses of space and connection. Much to Sean's liking. We also worked with, I was really proud of the fact that we could work with the Kāpiti Art Studio and our Disability Advisory Group around creating spaces that people felt welcome and their stories could be told. So one of the things that we have in the space is a sensory footpath, and that was something that got brought up in the Disability Advisory Group. Also in the space, there's so you can see on table tennis, a sensory footpath. There's a children's road track. So often I walk past that space, you'll see grandmothers playing with their grandchildren or reading a book while their children are playing with the cars. You'll see groups of mothers playing there with their toddlers. It's been really cool to see that space. There's also a shed that can be utilised by our community, so if they want to, they can email us and we can give them a code and they can activate their space and run their own small events. So some of the things that we've been noticing since creating the Meanwhile space is that we've seen a decrease in antisocial behaviour. So before the Meanwhile space was created, there were reports of lots of antisocial behaviour such as drinking, driving onto the lawn, unsafe gatherings and vandalism. Some staff have come up to me in some public talking about how they feel safer walking to their cars, especially in the afternoons. We've seen a utilisation of this space, such as the youth planning local events, picnics, groups of mums using the tracks. The other day we walked past, we saw a group of people taking pizza down there. We saw an older couple using the space, and then round the sides, if you go down there, you'll see it's made with this board. And if you have a look, it's got a whole heap of reusable stuff, so people were looking at that. It was really cool. Some of the feedback that we've had, one in particular was our neighbours, which is the Paraparumu Bridge Club. They said, I think you've transformed the area into something wonderful for the community. I count us lucky to be able to sit on the doorstep and watch the interaction you've sparked by creating the Meanwhile space. The area has now become a fun place, and from our windows we often observe people, especially children, enjoying the treasures it contains, and that feels good. Another one from Rebecca Collett was that I think you've transformed the area into something wonderful for the community, and I count us lucky to be able to. Oh no, wrong one. Sorry, I popped
That's
into.
all right.
Oh yeah.
So we can look through these
Oh, yeah.
in our own time. 'Cause
Okay.
we're running out of time.
That's all right.
That's okay.
Cool.
Thanks, Nori.
So that's all about the Meanwhile space from me, and if you want to take a look, you're more than welcome to. Thank you.
Thank you. We've all certainly, some of us have received some really positive feedback around the community space. And I think it feeds to that indoor-outdoor flow that we heard from the previous discussion. So we've certainly delivered on something that was of value to people as well, with that integration of the indoor and outdoor spaces. So yeah, congratulations to the team. Well done. Martin?
Yeah, look, yeah, awesome work down there. But just a quick question, with regards to safety aspect, is there any lighting down there in the evenings? Is it sort of sensory, or is it just switched on all the time, or what do you
There is lighting down there.
It's well, if you go down there at night, it's well lit. So it's well lit, or both sides of the Meanwhile space, and also the container. If you walk into it, it
That's
triggers
awesome.
lighting as well.
No, just sort of check. Thank
There's
you.
also cameras as well.
Cool. No, I saw that one there. Yeah, awesome.
Thank you. Well done.
We'll carry on. So just quickly, I think everyone's had a look at the financials. So currently there is money from year 4 on in the proposed LTP that we're just engaging on. And just covering off next steps. So we will be back here on the 30th of May to discuss the building options. I think it's fair to say we'll be recommending that the building is demolished, and hopefully we can find some money next year to do that. And then we'll look at from there some options and what options and opportunities we have in line with the LTP. And we'll certainly be looking at the range of ideas that have been discussed here today.
Outdoor performance venue. So no, thanks for today. We've got through a lot, and thanks for your patience for the late start and your answering of our questions and comments. Certainly a lot of ideas and enthusiasm around this, and around the table and also in the community, clearly, and really great to see that support for the work that was done in the past, and encouragement to keep delivering in this space one way or the other.
Great.
So we'll close that off now. Thank you so much, David, Nori and Michelle, and the staff who are here today. And we'll break for lunch until 1:30. I was going to try and fit in a little. So thank you. Yeah, thank you. I was going to try and fit in a little discussion